Welcome back to Judgment and Decision Making. I'm Dr. Padilla. Now we're going to talk about evolution of behavior, and we are officially at chapter 10. Just a brief overview of some of the key points in evolution. Of course, this is an oversimplification, but I want to make sure that we're all on board with a few key points. The first is that biological traits are inherited. There's genes that you have that you pass on to your descendants. The gene mutation and recombination makes traits vary. The exact combination of genes that you are expressing won't be the same as with your offspring. This is why you might have different colored eyes than your father or mother, for example. Not all variants successfully reproduce equally. There's some traits that are more likely to be passed down than others. And finally, evolution is not just a theory. That's to say that there is so much evidence to support evolution. It is not appropriate to say it's just a theory. It's really scientific fact at this point. We share 98% of our genes with apes, 96% with monkeys, 75% with dogs, and even 20% with fruit flies. There's a variety of unintelligent design that's happened throughout human evolution. In addition to the types of evolutionary demands that make us great at some things, there's also some evolutionary demands that are just kind of left over. This sort of extra things that didn't get changed out of the system. So for example, we have muscles in our skin that give us goosebumps because our ancestors had their hair attached to those muscles, and in other apes, their muscles make their hair stand up when they are emotionally aroused. This had some benefit for our ancestors, no longer has benefit to us because we don't have hair to indicate if we're aroused or not. But there's a variety of circumstances like that where the trait that we have has really no function at this point. Bottom line here is that evolution shapes our understanding of life, and it is hard to understand anything living except for in the context of evolution. And behavior can be shaped by evolution. That's what we're here to talk about, is behavior and decision making. For example, desert animals' kidneys excel at retaining water, and giraffes have huge hearts that can pump blood up to their brain. These are some classical examples. Desert rats that died of thirst didn't live to reproduce. Neither did giraffes with weak hearts or short necks. So this type of behavior that helped the giraffe be successful in life was also one that helped them continue to pass down their genes. Behavior can be shaped by similar forces, but it is complicated. This is happening right now. Rarely in modern human history have we faced such a strong demonstration of how behavioral change due to external factors in humans can influence our behavior. But wearing masks and staying at home will increase survival among those groups. And I think this is a really interesting time. When else have we experienced a situation where massive portions of the population are at risk of dying if they don't change particular behavior? Another example is male langur monkeys kill off infants, called infanticide. Why do they do that? You would think if a male monkey was interested in having his species be successful, he would let all the babies live in the surrounding, in his group. However, their social structure has one breeding male and a group of females. The male doesn't care about increasing the population of the species, just having his kids populate the species. So he goes into a new group and he will kill off all of the babies in that particular group. The goal here is then to have all of the women who were suckling babies, all the females who were suckling babies, begin ovulation so he can impregnate them. For the females part, what they do is they try to fight off the male monkeys, of course, because 50% of their genes are in their baby at that current moment, and they've already invested time and energy into that little monkey. So they don't want that monkey to not survive. They don't care if was a contributor to the genes. They just know that they put effort into that baby monkey and they want it to survive. The other interesting thing they do is they can fake ovulation. to trick the male monkey into thinking that they're ovulating, so there's no need to kill their baby. Competitive infanticide may be disadvantageous to particular species. For example, the mountain gorilla is reaching extinction, and so every time a new male goes into a group and practices infanticide, it negatively impacts the overall population. So this sort of focus on replicating your own genes in these cases isn't helpful for the entire society, but this is a behavior that is demonstrated in these different groups. Now here's an example of some human practices in terms of identifying who is the father and who isn't.
Brittany's life is one big mess. That's exactly why she is my ex. 1, the baby doesn't even look like you. 2, Brittany doesn't even know who she slept with. 3, I even tried to warn Corey.
Hey, don't call my girlfriend a hoe.
You think you're the father?
I hope I am.
In the case of 6-month-old Hope, David, you are not the father. In the case of 6-month-old Hope, Corey, you are not the father.
That was a silly example, but I wanted to be clear that humans do lots of peculiar behaviors as well in terms of child rearing and identifying who the parents are. Now, another example is kin selection. I would gladly sacrifice my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. You actually share 50% of the variation in your genes with your siblings, 25% with step siblings, and so on. So if this is you, you have 100% of your genes, of course. If you have 2 brothers, they would have 50% of your gene variation, and together they would represent a sum of 100% of that gene variation. And then if you have 8 cousins, you would have a whole, in sum, 100% of your gene variation. That's why you, your brothers, and your cousins have an equivalent amount of gene variation. So you should sacrifice yourself for your brothers, 2 brothers, or 8 cousins. If passing on your genes matters the most, you are likely to help raise siblings' children above strangers' children, fight on behalf of your children, and be attracted to moderately related people. Now that can make you feel uncomfortable, and that there's a give and take between moderately related and too related. There's many issues associated with full inbreeding because there's not enough genetic variation in the population. So there's a sweet spot. For example, women prefer the smell of moderately related men to unrelated men. And in a 160-year study in Iceland, the highest productivity success arose from 3rd and 4th cousin marriages. So apparently that's the optimal combination of unique genes introduced into the population and similar genes being passed down. Okay, recognizing relatives. We have innate recognition and probabilities. Some animals can sense relatives with 100% accuracy. Humans, including apes, use a more probabilistic setup. What they do for apes is we ask, how long of the child's peak ovulation was spent with me? All of it? Well, then it's probably my kid. And as we saw in that clip before, that can be tricky because it's just an estimate, and you have to know really if all of the ovulation time was spent with you or not. Summary here, evolution shapes our understanding of life, and it's hard to understand anything living except for in the context of evolution. Behavior can be shaped by evolution. And one example is with kin selection, which is an evolutionary strategy that favors the reproductive success of organisms' relatives, even at the cost of organisms' own survival and reproduction.